All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, where we will be working with panel pages. My name is Sarah and I will be hosting today's session. During the session, if you have any questions, please enter them in the GoToMeeting chat window. I will do my best to answer all of your questions before the end of today's session. If I have not answered all the questions, I will be sending out a follow-up email with the Q&As and any related documents. So let's get started. We are going to go over a number of topics today, but they are all related to panel or portrait pages. We are starting today's session where we ended last week when we finished the session on importing the PSPA file. We will begin by creating a portrait section from the book ladder and then take a closer look into sorting and grouping of panels, customizing a panel or group, customizing the header, changing the order of panel pages, inserting page breaks, and excluding groups. The previously imported PSPA file is now saved on the remote storage, so we can proceed with creating numerous portrait projects. Before we begin, you would need to know one of two options. Are all the portraits going to be in one master project? If so, this creates one large project which will not allow other projects on the book ladder to be dragged in between the portrait pages. Or are you going to create multiple smaller portrait projects which can be created based on teacher or grade, and then they're their own little sections and can be rearranged on the book ladder as well as pages placed in between them on the book ladder. We will first take a look at using the simple mode to flow the entire PSPA. So to begin, we come to our Add Pages button and we go to our Portrait option here. So this is giving the project a name. So in this case, we're going to do one big file. So I'm just going to call it Master Portraits and hit Create. This does take a moment because it's doing a few things. It's creating the file, doing the save, the very first save to remote storage, and it's actually pulling the database from the remote storage as well. So it'll take a moment. The amount of time will vary based on an individual's internet quality, computer, and on the PSPA. I'm working with a PSPA that's just under 350. So if you're working with a larger one, it could take a moment or two longer. Once it's done thinking, you can see it's taken us into the editor mode. A blank panel has begun and our panel hover is open. So the panel hover is what controls and drives all our panel or portrait pages. So as I mentioned, we're going to first look at doing the entire school using simple mode. So I'll come to our hover, select simple, and then I'm going to choose a complete panel set, and I'm going to say let's do students by teacher. Just select that and then allow it to think a moment, because what it's going to do is create enough pages to accommodate the entire school and sort it based by teacher. So I do have my pages hover open on the right hand side. So as you can see now, we do have quite a few. We have 20 pages and they're all filled with different portraits, like so. If you need to update anything, we do have the Portraits tab here, so that you can do it two ways. If there's somebody specific, so like let's say Larissa here needed to be changed, I could select the menu and then go locate this person on the organizer, and it will reroute us to our Portraits tab. Or you can click on the Portraits tab and then just use the filters on the left-hand side here to display certain groups. So now I'm going to go back to the editor, and just before I do that, any changes that you make on the Portraits tab does save automatically. So all you have to do is go back to the editor and changes will be applied. For moving portrait pages around, you can't use the pages hover. You do have to come to Advanced and then Panel, And as you can see, there's a list of all the teachers here. So to move them, I'm currently on page 3. If you look on the right, you'll see that page 3 is highlighted in gray. So I want Hardy to be at the top. So on the panel hover, I'm going to use these arrows and bump him to the top of the project. So this is where you deal with moving the panel pages. The default sorting is also by priority, last name, then first name. So the lower the number in the priority field, the closer to the top of the page they'll be. So all our teachers are 3s and students are 5s. If there's a group here that you don't want showing at this time, you can simply locate them, select them, and then select the Enable button, and you will see that that class has disappeared. And the other thing with creating the portrait pages this way, so some schools like to have a candid page in between the portraits. So to do that, you do have to open the project like it is right now, and then use the Pages hover or the Add Pages button here. So you still can insert candids in the middle of our portraits, but when doing a large flow of the portraits like this, you do have to add the candids from here. So I'm actually going to save and close this project, and then we will take a look at creating smaller portrait projects, either based on teacher or grade, from the book ladder. And this is also communicating with remote storage again, so it does take a moment. So as you can see, the book ladder has updated to include the 21-page file. So now I'm going to go to Add Pages and select Portrait again. Except this time, I'm going to do a smaller one. So I'm naming the file because I'm just going to focus on kindergarten portraits. So if you're going to do it by grade like this, you could, I would recommend picking a convention that makes sense. So like grade 1, grade 2, or if you're doing it by teacher, you can use the teacher's name. So I'll select Create. So a couple nice things about doing it in smaller projects like this is you can then manage the pages from the book ladder. And then also multiple team members can work on portrait pages at a time. So if you have a project for the kindergartens that I can work on, then my teammate Billy can go and work on the grade 1 portraits because they're 2 separate projects. Okay, so now we will use the advanced mode on the panel hover to flow the kindergartens. So what I'm going to do is make sure I'm on advanced and then panel. Then I'm going to come down to my group and say group by teacher, because I know there's more than one teacher. And then I'm going to select show only. Oh, I did that backwards, sorry. I want to say group by grade and flow by teacher. I'm going to hit apply. And again, it will create as many pages as necessary. So in this case, there's 2. So one thing I noticed right away is I don't have a teacher here in the kindergarten AM. But when I go to the PM, the teacher is there. And this happens quite often in elementary schools. So what you would do to fix that is go to the Portraits tab. So in this case, I'm going to locate Mr. Roche. And right now you can see a little circle following my mouse. That's it indicating that it's thinking. There we go. All right, so there she is. So when I click on Mr. Roche, you'll see her attributes come up on the right-hand side. So I'm looking at the grade field because that's how I've sorted this section of portraits. And she has only got the kindergarten PM in there, so that's why she's only showing up in that class. So what you can do in any of these attribute fields, you can use a semicolon right after the first grade in this case, and then type in the other class that you need them to be in. So I did kindergarten PM, semicolon, with no spaces, and then kindergarten AM. So I'm going to click out of there, and there's no save button. You don't have to worry about that. So you click on editor. You saw a progress bar flashed up. So there she is on the PM still. We'll go back to AM. And as you can see, she's now been added there. So that semicolon comes in handy if you want teachers displayed on a staff page as well as their class pages, or if you have a teacher teaching more than one class. So it's pretty handy. So now that I've gone over the two different ways to flow pages, we are going to take a closer look at all the editing options in regards to these portrait or panel pages. So let's take a look at this grid tab first. So I'm on advanced and then grid. This is where you can actually play with the layout of the portrait pages. And whatever I do, it's going to affect both these pages. But if I did want them to look differently, all I need to do is under on the panel hover, under Apply All Settings to, is I could select one of the groups, but I'm going to make my changes affect all. So as you can see, this is where we have our columns and rows that we can play with. So I like the 5x5. This is where you can have your featured images. So this is also where you can turn on the knockouts. Automatic knockouts are really handy if you're wanting to add some candid elements to a page. So once I've turned it on, I can go to my images hover, and let's just select an image and drop it on the page. As you can see, these portraits now move around the candid image. If I didn't put that automatic knockout on, this image would have sat covering these faces. And the portraits that have disappeared are just being moved onto an extra page. So if you look on the pages hover, the kindergarten AM class now has 2 pages. And based on where I sit it, increases or decreases the number of people on that page. So that's an interesting feature. The layout is where it sits on the page or how the last row sits. So right now it's set to be aligned with the gutter if you want the last row to be centered. These 4 fields, top, bottom, gutter, and edge, are the space from that section of the page. So if I increase from the top, you'll see that I'm getting more space. And you can always hit the default to bring it back. Then we have our border settings. So this is actually going to affect the images themselves. So these settings are the exact same as your border editor options when dealing with candids. So the default is a small white border. You can turn it off. You can change the color. You can change the shape of the frames. You can even change the thickness of the border as well. And then below that is the image settings. Oops. So this is where you can change the images themselves. So if you wanted to make them all black and white, so, and again, it's the same editor as the image editor. And then, oh, come on, there we go. Then just below that, we do have our shadow settings, which can also be turned on and off, or the offset adjusted, and the color changed. So next we'll take a look at the header tab. So this is where you can come to make changes to the header up here. The first section here, header settings. The first is, do you want a header up there? So if you changed it to none, we'll get rid of it. Group means on page 1 it will say a header, but on any additional pages after that for that class it will say nothing. Whereas group plus continued means any consecutive pages for that class will have a header, and it will be whatever you type in this text field. The header font section here. So this is where you can control what's going to be displayed in the header. So right now you see this, bit of weird looking text. This is actually code that's being driven from the Portraits tab. So we call this a tag, and you can either use more tags or you can type to get the header the way you want it. So what I'm actually going to do is a combination of tags and typing. So I'm going to go to the beginning, and you can tell a tag begins and ends because they always begin with a % and end with a %. So I'll go to tags, use custom, school, and then here's my attributes. So I'll go salutation, which isn't available. So that's not going to work. So I can type this, and then I'll go get a teacher. There. So as you can see, I've used the teacher tag and the grade tag, and I've also typed some spaces and the word misses and the word class. So if I go to the other page, you'll see that the header does say kindergarten PM, but it matches the format. So that's the nice thing about tags, is it populates the information for that class. If you want to change it for each class, that's where this apply settings to. You can select one and just manually type in what you would like to show. You can also change the header font. Appearance is where you can change the font color. Like so. And then we also have our shadow options. Up here is where you can increase or decrease the size of the header as well. So now we'll take a look at our labels tab. So the labels tab is what is going to control the labels below all the images, so everybody's name. So label stylings is currently set to under the image. This is where you can come and change the position. So if you want it beside the panels, I prefer under. So that's where you can adjust those. The width and height is how you can control the size. Again, they're just sliders that have default settings as well that you can adjust. And then the label font, this is always defaulted to be the first name, last name tags. You can change the order to last name, first name if you wanted, and you do have the tags button here where you can include more if you like. And then you have the same font editing options, so font type, bold, the appearance, to change the color, and then you also have the shadow. On the simple mode, you do have some options as well. They're just more basic, but it is the featured image, auto knockout, and some basic editing options in regards to the label coloring and header coloring. So now that I'm done changing this portrait page, if I wanted to add a background, it's just like a candid page. So you can come to the backgrounds, find something that suits, and then just click and drag, and it will apply it to the background. Now when you drop a background on a portrait page, it does apply it just to the one page, not all of them. So I'd have to go to the other page and give it either the same background or something different, like so. Okay, so now we're done. I'll hit save and close. And so while I was working on this portrait section, somebody else could have been working on one of the other grades, such as grade 1 or grade 2. So by breaking it into smaller chunks, either by teacher or school, teacher or grade, it depends on what school wants, that allows for multiple people to work on the different segments. And so as you can see, the large project here is 20 odd pages. And it's quite large, and I can't add a page, or if I wanted to place these in the middle, it won't let me. And so this is just an example of managing the portrait pages from the ladder. So these can't be dragged here because that's one massive project. Whereas if we broke it into smaller segments, I could just click and drag these around. So to rearrange these portrait pages, I would have to open the project back into editor mode, which then means only I would be working on it. So in the scenario where you're going to do smaller projects, to do the next section, you would simply, again, just come to add pages, portrait, give the project a name, and then flow it based on your requirements. So that brings us to the end of our panel pages or portrait pages lunch and learns. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I will stay on the line for a few minutes in case you have any questions, but if not, thank you for coming and we'll talk to you later.